try something a little different today. This morning I went on a Facebook group dedicated to near-death experiences. I grabbed a bunch of questions, I wrote them all down, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. For the record, no, I am not stoned. This is just what my eyes look like during allergy season. First question. People that have died, how much can they see on Earth? Can they see us walking around? Can they see us and everything we do? After somebody dies, yes, they can see on Earth, but not everything. And the reality is that they're focused on doing their own thing. They're in heaven, they're in the other realm, the afterlife land. They're not focusing on what's going on here. And there is a certain degree of privacy. So to answer that question, can they witness parts of our lives? Potentially, but we also have free will, and we have the ability to allow and not allow, usually on an unconscious level, spirits to interact with us. If we have an unconscious desire to contact somebody or a deceased loved one or somebody who's passed, or even a conscious desire, and we speak that and try to make that connection, then that's almost like an invitation. It's inviting them into parts of our lives. So it is possible, but for the most part, on several levels, it's not happening. Has anyone visited the other side? What is it like? Do we eat, have sex, or do what we like? Do we have homes? Do we have bodies? Or do we float aimlessly in a big black void? Well, we certainly don't float aimlessly in a big black void, but we don't have bodies either, and we don't have homes. To a certain degree, you are doing what you like, but you're definitely not eating. You don't have a body to sustain. Purpose of eating is to keep your body alive, so that's not happening. When we're on the other side, it's a very calm and blissful state. It's not a physical reality. There's no 3D, tangible, dense objects. If you think of something, you can manifest it immediately. If you want to be somewhere, you immediately go there. If you think of somebody, you can immediately go to them. There's no barriers that we would think of in a physical way. We do maintain our personality to a certain degree, but there's not a desire to do a lot of the things that we did when we were on Earth. It's a very calm and restful state, and we're interacting mostly with other beings, soulmates, and spending a lot of time just recovering from our earthly incarnation. There's a lot of rest and recuperation that happens when we're there. It's a very chill space. What do you think about dreams with someone who has already died? I think multiple things can be happening there. It's not necessarily just one thing. In some instances, it could be where the spirit of that person who is deceased is coming to visit you, and they're making an attempt to communicate with you. That's certainly possible. There are other situations and circumstances where it could be a fragment of your unconscious mind or a figment of your, not necessarily imagination, but something that's residing in your unconscious mind, maybe a memory of that person that resurfaces, where it's not necessarily them contacting you or communicating with you. It's more an opportunity for your unconscious mind to integrate something, or you're just doing a piece of work and creating an opportunity to either relieve emotions that may have been connected to that person, or to do some sort of integration in relationship to that person, emotional integration typically. So it's not necessarily one thing or another. It could be a wide variety of things. Why is a human unable to know about before birth events and afterlife developments? Is it possibly because of the limitations of the sensory organs and human brain memory? Well, first and foremost, the human brain is not responsible for memory. Scientists have been trying to figure out how the brain retains memory for centuries, and they still have yet to define an organ or specific part of the brain that is responsible for memory, not even the neurons. And the neurons can typically last an entire lifetime of a person, but they don't know the mechanism for memory retention. The reality is, memories are stored in a field. Our brains are receivers. Our soul, our consciousness, it exists outside of the body, and that is where the memories are retained. And in order to access a memory, we tap into this greater field. And again, the brain acts like a radio receiver, receiving these messages and memories, accessing them that way. The other part, why is a human unable to know about before birth events? Humans can know about before birth events. There are many, many examples of this. Past life hypnosis regression. There are literally thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have gone through the process and have been able to access past life memories. There's also thousands of accounts, well documented and verified accounts of children who can remember things from past lives that are verifiable that there's no way that they should know. So when it comes to that, it is possible. The reason most people don't remember past life memories is because we choose not to on an unconscious level. Choosing not to remember past lives, it allows us to focus here and now. We come to Earth to learn lessons. And if we're worrying about the things that happened to us in our past lives, it just distracts us potentially from what we're doing in the present moment and the lessons we're supposed to learn here, now. I have gone through my own journey remembering past lives. And for a long time, it was just a distraction. It was the shiny object. It was cool. It was interesting. And ultimately, for me, a large period of time I spent really delving deep into past life memories, I was spiritually bypassing. I wasn't doing the work that I needed to do right now. So there's a very good reason that we don't remember our past lives. And I think more and more people are starting to remember these past lives. And it's for a reason. It's to gain awakening and to start to gain access to these functions of ourselves and to realize how infinite we are and our ability to connect with these other parts of ourselves and just the vastness and the incredible abilities that our consciousness holds. Do you believe that spirits really haunt people that cause their deaths? This is another one of those situations where it's not one thing or the other. For example, if there's a car accident and the two people who were in the accident had no prior connection or communication, anything of that sort, and it was completely accidental, there's really likely no reason for the deceased to haunt the person who's living. There's just no connection there. In that circumstance, the person who was in the vehicle that caused the accident that potentially killed the other person, that person's basically playing a role. And while it is unpleasant and it's really a challenging role to play, there's no reason for there to be any continuation of that like energetic bond. On the other hand, if there is an energetic bond and it's something that's premeditated and there is hard feelings or emotions or some sort of emotional connection between the two people, and especially if it's a strong emotional connection or it's a really like a lot of negative emotion built up between the two people, and there's something like an intentional premeditated, then that emotional bond is connecting those two people together, those two spirits together. And while the person may not be in a body, that connection, that energetic bond still remains. And that may look like a haunting, that may look like what you would call a haunting, that may look like many different things, but that energetic bond does not necessarily and very likely does not go away after the person dies. And again, it may look like a haunting, it may look like something else, but there's going to very likely continue to be some sort of a relationship with those two spirits until that emotional bond has been resolved. After a murder event, the murderer is booked by police, judge delivered death sentence, executed. The question is whether the soul will be relieved and happy. This is not an either-or sort of thing. And just because in life somebody was delivered a sentence by a judge or authority doesn't mean that's going to translate into specific actions or events in someone's spiritual journey. The intention of the person who committed the murder is going to be really important, their state. If you're looking at somebody who's deranged, a psychopath, who's a serial killer, something like that, and they're committing atrocities just for the sake of creating pain and destruction and torment, That being, when they get to the other side, is probably not going to have a lot of relief and definitely not happiness. They may not be tortured necessarily. Hell isn't a real place, it's not a real thing, but they're going to have to come to terms with and look at their actions and deal with the consequences, the energetic karmic consequences of that. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean burning in hell forever, but it does mean, to a certain degree, experiencing the pain that's been inflicted on someone else. If somebody is committed and maybe it was an accident, or they weren't in the right state of mind, they weren't intending to hurt somebody, maybe it was a drunk driving thing, maybe it was any number of things, maybe they in their heart felt justified, like avenging a family member, something like that. A person's state of mind and intention plays a big role in what they experience on the other side, and their intention of doing harm or doing something that's good. And people do vigilante justice where they may commit a murder in order to prevent somebody from doing more harm. Is never great. I'm never condoning. And a situation like that, the circumstances are very different from, say, the serial killer. So the outcome that the person experiences on the other side is going to be very different. And the karmic sort of energetic shackles, or the energetic aspect of that, is also going to be very different. And yeah, how they have to resolve that karma, those actions are going to be not the same. So does time exist in the afterlife? No. Once our spirits transcend these physical bodies and we go to the next level, the next plane, that spiritual place, you can call it heaven, you can call it the next dimension, whatever you want to call it, that is a place where time does not exist. And everything is being experienced simultaneously, potentially all at once. You can go back to your past, you can go to future potential timelines and events. It's a much different experience. Getting from one place to another, you move as quickly as thought. So if you think of somebody, boom, you're there. If you think of a different place, boom, you're there. If you think of having something, boom, it's there. Time as we experience it does not exist in that space. I often think of what truly is on the other side of life for us. I also wonder if there will be a reconnection of family and friends. So typically when we leave our bodies, we're greeted by guides, ancestors, and family members, beings who we're familiar with, quite often loved ones that we've known from this life. There might also be some loved ones that we don't recognize, who we never met in this life, but we're recognized by members of our soul group and beings and souls who are close to us and who we've reincarnated with over and over and over again, and have a lot of soul memories and past life connections with. When we leave the body, there's a whole sequence of events that happens. Michael Newton, Journey of Souls, does a really good job of describing what happens, but there's a whole process that we go through in order to assess what happened during this life, look at the lessons that we've learned. Did we learn what we were supposed to learn in this life? Did we not learn what we were supposed to learn in this life? What could we have done better? Making assessments, and also resting, just recalibrating, connecting with those spirits, having re-establishing these bonds, and just a lot of rest and relaxation once we've kind of gone through the process. And the last half of the process is mostly the rest and relaxation. Time doesn't really exist in that place, so it's hard to say, put a timeline on it, but that's pretty much what happens. And yes, we reconnect with people, with loved ones, people who, even that we may have had difficult relationships in this life, on the other side, we can connect with them and say, oh, thank you for helping me to learn this lesson, or whatever it is. Our relationships have a lot different tone to them when we're not tied to the emotions and the experiences of this three-dimensional plane. What are our personalities like in the afterlife? Well, for the most part, we drop our personalities. Our personalities are dictated by our life experiences, memories, our culture, our society, our environments that we grow up in. There's a lot of things that dictate our personalities. And when we transcend the body and are back in our pure spiritual form, a lot of that stuff just fades away. We lose the emotional connection to a lot of that stuff, and it just becomes completely unimportant and irrelevant. We still maintain the essence of ourself, our soul, our individual and unique essence, but the personality quirks that we experience in this life are often much subdued on the other side. And it's not exactly like a personality. There are still recognizable traits amongst us and amongst souls, but what we would consider a personality in this life, in this experience, doesn't stay with us in the afterlife. Just thinking, there will be no gravitational force when we leave our bodies. Are we going to go off like a rocket and end up lost and end up on another planet? No, our spirits are not subject to the forces of physics. The gravitational pull will not have any bearing on our spirit. Our spirit is not a three-dimensional object. There's no mass, there's no weight, there's no volume to the spirit. It's pure energy. So there's no sort of inertia or momentum that's going to rocket us off in any certain situation. Yes, we hear in experiences and near-death experiences, people talk about levitating over their body as if there's distance, as if they're moved away from their body. Yes, the point of view of your spirit can move and you can experience different locations, but not in a way that's dictated or connected to gravity. So you're going to stay in one spot. And when you're done with the body, there is a pathway that you go down. There's a series of steps, and you're led on this journey, this afterlife journey. You'll be met by beings and spirit guides and family members, and they will escort you to where you need to go. So you're not going to be shot off into the ethers. There are circumstances where guides and spirit teams or relatives may not take you right away. There's situations where people remain on Earth, remain in the location that they're at, ghosts, familiar spirits. But those kind of situations, there's never just being rocketed off into space. So you're safe in that aspect. Family members that have shown me no love on Earth, will they actually love me in heaven? On one hand, just because somebody doesn't show you love doesn't mean that they don't love you. In someone's mind, their intention may be a loving act, and you may perceive that as not a loving act. So on one hand, there can be a perception that there's no love there. On a spiritual level, we all choose our incarnations, and the people who are close to us, our family members, we choose our family dynamics to a certain extent. We still have free will, and there still is this aspect of every single second of our life is not predetermined. And the major aspects and the major relationships in our lives are typically predetermined to a certain extent. We have these soul contracts or agreements before we incarnate. And really challenging relationships, those can be agreed upon coming from a place of love. Before we're incarnated on the other side, somebody may choose to incarnate with you and take on the role of being somebody who pushes you or challenges you or treats you in a certain way that is going to force you and encourage you to learn certain lessons and to grow. A parent doesn't necessarily not love their child when they're disciplining them. It may not look like a loving situation or a loving act, and the child may not perceive it as a loving act, but the intention is to prepare the child for different situations in life and to prepare them to navigate things that they're going to encounter later on in life. This happens on a larger scale as well, on our spiritual scale, on our spiritual level. So when we reach the other side, there's nothing but love. You're going to encounter people who you've had challenging relationships with, and you're going to be like, hey, thank you for being a dick, because it helped me learn how to deal with certain people, or it helped me learn how to manage my emotions, or it helped me learn how to do X, Y, and Z. And that person's going to say, yeah, sorry about that, but I'm glad it all worked out, and I love you all the same. And you're going to say, yeah, I love you too. And maybe in the next life, I can be the boss who torments you, or I can be this, or I can be that. That's how this thing works. That's how we all learn and grow together. It's not random. It's a beautifully orchestrated and loving situation and thing that we find ourselves in, this crazy cycle of reincarnation coming back over and over again. It's all for a reason, and it's all for a loving divine purpose. Can you get a ghost pregnant? No, you cannot get a ghost pregnant. They don't have the necessary parts. They don't have a body to bring the baby to term. No, you can't get a ghost pregnant. And on an interesting side note, there is such a thing as sexual energy. We all experience it, and we all feel it very viscerally in our bodies. Sexual energy is energy, so it doesn't require a body to feel it. It's got its own specific vibration. So just because you can't get a ghost pregnant doesn't mean that a ghost or a disembodied being can't sense sexual energy. It doesn't mean that they don't have sexual energy themselves. We've all had experiences in dreams where there was an exchange of sexual energy or sexual situations come up. You're not in a physical body there, but you still experience sexual energy. Disembodied beings like ghosts can still experience and exchange sexual energy to a certain degree. Not how we do as we're incarnated on these bodies, but it's a thing. I was wondering if spirits know it's their birthday, and do they celebrate it? No. A spirit is not in a body, which means it's not been birthed. When you're on the other side in that state, it's just irrelevant, and you don't have a body, and you're able to access and recognize that you've had many past lives. So at that point, it's a moot point. You don't even think about it. You've had many birthdays over the course of many, many lives. How can energy just exist? That is the question. How can anything just exist? Everything we see materialized in the three-dimensional world is just a form of energy. Everything in existence is just energy. How can it exist? Nobody knows. Nobody knows, and nobody can know. It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Was there non-existence before there was existence? And if there was nothingness and non-existence, what happened to cause something to exist out of nothing? How is that possible? And how is it possible that something has always been existing for eternity? And what even is eternity? I love these kind of questions, partially because there is no answer. They're paradoxical. You can toss this around in your mind and your brain forever and not come to a solid conclusion. And I think that's amazing. And I think it's a really useful practice to think about these kind of questions. It's good for us. It helps give us a different perspective, helps us think about things differently. What even is energy? Where did it come from? How is this all happening? What is the likelihood that you are right where you are, right here, right now, and that I am right here, right now, experiencing this life? It's miraculous. It's extraordinary. It doesn't make any sense, and it can't make sense. You can't wrap your head around it. You can only experience it right here, right now, in the present moment. It's beyond words, simply. To answer that question, there is no answer to that question. And that brings me to a thought, that something that I'd heard once long ago that really resonated with me. That God knows everything except where it came from. And I personally believe that to be true. God knows everything except where it came from. Has anyone experienced strange happenings with your cell phone or other personal electronic devices after having an extensive grieving moment about a close loved one? I've never personally experienced that, and beings on the other side who have especially recently left their body, they do still have an energetic connection to the three-dimensional plane. There are so many stories of entities, beings, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, interacting on the 3D plane with different objects, with people. They're able to manipulate energy in such a way where they can affect, to a certain degree, things that are happening here. I think the longer a spirit has been out of the body, the less they have that ability, or the less potent that ability is. But that might look like moving something on a table. That could look like many different things, that the interaction, that what they're able to do. That can also look like interfering with your electronic devices, being able to change electronic waves, being able to turn on a TV or flip on a light switch. I actually did have an experience after a session doing some channeling work, trying to clear out energies from this house, where in the middle of the night, a light bulb exploded. The light was off. This light bulb just exploded in the middle of the night, the day after I'd done this work. And it was clear to me that the work wasn't done and that there were still energies and entities that were present that were looking for resolution and weren't, they didn't want to necessarily just be evicted from the space they were at because they liked it. Eventually, we were able to resolve the situation, but it was my belief that, and it was very clear to me, like just intuitively, I just knew it, that, oh, that was a sign. Like somebody was not really happy that we're trying to clear this situation up, and they let us know about it. So to answer your question, yeah. And especially if you're reaching out to that being, or you have the intention of connecting with that person or that spirit, or there's a strong energetic emotional bond there, like especially then there's much more likely to be some sort of interaction, or they're much more likely to be able to communicate with you in some roundabout way. If the people who abused you die and they have to experience what they did to you, do they continue to experience the pain their acts of cruelty are still causing you now? No, they don't. And neither do you. Pain is not optional. Pain is a part of life. If you're alive, you're experiencing pain. Suffering, on the other hand, is simply unintegrated and unprocessed pain. We've all had experiences in our lives. For example, a breakup, where in the moment it was terrible. It was awful, heartbreak, the whole 9 yards, a lot of pain associated with that. And most of us can look back and look at breakups that we've had in the past and look at them and say, wow, I'm so glad that happened. I learned so much from that. That person taught me so much. It set me up for this next relationship, whatever may be. The pain you're experiencing from then and the pain you're experiencing now are very different. There's no pain now because the pain has been integrated and processed. The experience itself doesn't change. The experience is what it is. But as the pain becomes processed and integrated, it subsides. When a spirit transcends its body, there is a life review where that spirit has to atone for and look at all the circumstances where they've caused harm to another person or another being, another spirit. And they experience that pain, but they process it immediately. Pain gets stored in our bodies. And one of the reasons why it turns into suffering is because it gets stuck in places and it doesn't get processed. When you're in that pure spiritual form, there's no physical form for the pain to get stuck to. So the processing just happens. You experience the pain and you're so much in the present moment that you just move through it. You don't hang on to it. None of that sticks to you. You retain the lesson and the memory from it. Like, oh man, I don't want to do that again. That did not feel good. In my next life, I'm not going to treat people that way, whatever it may be, but they don't retain that pain. In the same way, it's not necessary for us to suffer and to retain pains from the past. The only reason that happens is because something is unintegrated. Are dogs and cats in the afterlife? Yes. Dogs, cats, zebras, parakeets, any being that has a spirit will persist into the afterlife. The physical bodies will die, but the spirit is made up of just energy, and energy never dies. So it will continue on to another stage of its journey. That being said, we don't necessarily hang out with the dogs and cats. They're at a different developmental stage, and they're doing their thing in the afterlife, and we're doing our thing. And you can visit them, and there is, I'm sure, some spiritual connection there still, but they're not just hanging out with us typically. Are feelings random, just biological, or spiritual beings having an impact on us? Feelings are not random. Feelings and emotions are how the universe communicates with us. It's feedback. It's all signals to us, letting us know what is inside of us. When somebody says something that maybe upsets us in a certain way, It's the universe letting us know that there is something unresolved inside of us. It doesn't matter what the other person says or believes. You could have two people standing right next to each other. One person says some ignorant comment. One of the people is going to have a visceral, get upset sort of response, and the other person might not have any sort of response. It doesn't have anything to do with the external stimuli. It's all showing us what's inside of us, all of our emotions. Joe Dispenza says that thoughts are the language of the mind and emotions are the language of the body. This is how the universe communicates with us, because we're feeling beings when we're alive in this three-dimensional experience. Spiritual beings, I suppose spiritual beings can communicate with us through thoughts. So if they're able to implant or nudge a thought in our direction, and they know that it's going to encourage a certain response, say, for example, you have an aversion to a certain religion or a certain kind of religious practice, a being who maybe doesn't have your best interests in mind could nudge a thought about that certain thing that you don't like in your direction to try to mess with you, or to try to encourage you, or to create a situation where this thought is going to come in, you're going to interact with it, and it's going to elicit a negative emotional response. That is possible, and for the most part, it's not random. Our emotions definitely aren't random. Even if we don't recognize the trigger to it or the cause of an emotion, there's always something that causes an emotion, and it's always pointing towards something that is inside of us, alerting us to what is already there, never imposing something on us from the external. I keep feeling like someone is in the room with me when they are not. I get a shadow-like movement in my peripheral vision. When I look, no one's there. What does that mean? Well, it probably means something. Follow your feelings. Your feelings mean something. Listen to your intuition. Go inward. If you feel like there is a presence there, there probably is. What does it mean? That's a whole other question. It can mean any number of things. And in situations like this, just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. There could be somebody in the room next to you blowing on a dog whistle as hard as they can. It doesn't mean that that high-pitched frequency isn't being emitted. It just means you can't perceive it. In the same way, you might not be seeing something with your naked eye, but it doesn't mean that there's not an energetic presence there. What does it mean? That's up for interpretation. You really gotta sit with your intuition on that. Examine that feeling. What is that feeling telling you? Get real clear with it. Sit with it. Feel the real subtleties of that feeling. Does it feel positive? Does it feel negative? Does it feel like I'm being watched? Does it feel like somebody wants something from me? In this kind of situation, there's not a lot of really tangible evidence, so I really try to avoid making any assumptions. I look at the situation as if I'm an observer, a third person, say what is actually happening here, what is observably true, and what is not observably true. What could I potentially be putting my own spin on? I like to observe things from that perspective, and again, just getting really clear and starting to look for patterns. Do every time I go in this room, do I notice that I get the same feeling coming from the same direction? Or is it a certain time of day when I go in there? Or does this energy feel like somebody I know? Is it familiar? The person you should be asking these questions to is yourself, and spending time in meditation without a bunch of noise, so you can just try to hone in on that feeling as much as possible. And that's going to be the best guidance in a situation like this, where you don't have tangible evidence of something being there, but you intuitively have a strong sense that there is something more to the situation. Is our death date predestined? No. The exact date of your death is not predestined. And we do come into these incarnations with a plan. And we have a general idea, based on the contracts that we've come into this life with, about how long we'll live and the different things that will happen, the major life events that we'll experience. We may know that we're going to have a long life. We may know that we're going to have a short life, but the exact date is not set in stone. We do still have free will. We might take a certain path on the life plan. We might veer a little bit one way, we might veer a little bit another way, but we're going to be moving in a general direction and hit the milestones and the main points that we're supposed to hit. Exact death date? No, but you'll have an idea before you incarnate roughly how long your incarnation will be. Are we stardust? After life, we die. Does our light go back to the universe? That's actually two questions. The first question, yeah, we are stardust. Our blood is made up of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin molecules have 4 atoms of iron in them. Atom only occurs in the natural universe when a massive star at its core gets so dense it starts to create iron. It destabilizes the star and causes a supernova. So when iron is created in the universe, it comes from the explosion of a supermassive star. That is the only time iron is made. We're made up of stardust. Every part of us is made up of stardust. And after we die, does our light go back to the universe? I would say that our light never leaves the universe. They're not separate. If we believe that our light is not part of the universe, that is an error in our perception. It is all just one thing. Our perception and our mind is what creates division between anything. The ego mind, this human experience, when you leave your body and you go back to the spiritual plane, you realize, like, oh, it was always there. Energy never dies. You can't separate light. Everything is a form of energy. Why are innocent people suffering? Is this what happens to people who are harming others now in their next lives? We all incarnate on Earth in these bodies to experience pain and suffering. When we're in that spiritual plane, the next dimension after our lives, you don't experience pain and suffering. It's a very calm and chill and relaxed space. It's the ultimate comfort zone. And no growth ever happens inside your comfort zone. Think about lifting a weight. If you're lifting a weight, why are you doing that? Well, you need that resistance to build muscle. Forms of resistance are really important for us to be able to learn and grow. The pain and suffering that we're experiencing now is a blessing. It's helping us. Without that pain and suffering, we would be static. We would be plateaued. We wouldn't be moving. We wouldn't be growing. We wouldn't be expanding. There's a universal God-given impulse inside of all of us to grow and expand and learn. And when we're not growing and expanding and learning in some form, we're miserable. We're not happy. We're not in alignment with nature. Pain and suffering, while it is a challenging and unpleasant experience, we all chose it on some level. And it's temporary. And we're going to go back to that place where we can just chill and relax and say, oh, wow, I see why I did that, or I see why that person was in my life. I see why that happened. I'm glad I chose that because now I know, and I'm never going to impart that on other people anymore. And yeah, I'm better for having that experience. Could God or spiritual beings ever misunderstand you? No, not really. God or a truly advanced spiritual being, they can read you like a book. They can see your mind, body, spirit, which is all energy, look at it and know exactly what's going on with you. That being said, I'm going to read between the lines here and let you know that God is not going to follow your conscious mind. The conscious mind is only a small percentage of our self. The unconscious mind makes up over 90% of our being, of who we are. And when God or a spiritual entity or an angel looks at us and reads us, most of what they're reading is your unconscious mind. So if you're thinking, I want $1 million, I really want money, I really want money, I really want money, and unconsciously you believe that you're not worthy of money, or you think money's bad, or you have some limiting belief about money, and this could apply to anything in life. If that is a belief that is held within you, Spirit is going to respond to that. God is going to respond to what you truly believe in and what your unconscious mind wants. Do people believe NDEs are real, or merely hallucinations, or dreams, or made up for public attention to create a story? There's a lot of people on this planet. There's going to be a certain percentage of people that fall into each of those categories. Some people are going to believe that they are real. Some people are going to believe they're hallucinations, or dreams, and some people are going to believe that they are just made up. With as many NDE stories that are out there and how credible they are and the uniformity between them, if you believe that an NDE is just made up, or all NDEs are just made up to create a story or to get attention, mostly by people who have no desire for attention, then that doesn't speak to evidence. That speaks to a belief. The evidence for an afterlife is there through the NDEs, through many other avenues. If you don't believe it, it's not because of lack of evidence, it's because of some conflicting internal belief. Hallucinations or dreams, I mean, is a dream real? Is a dream real? You're having an experience, and is a hallucination real? How is a hallucination not real? If you're having an experience, you may not be physically having an experience, but how is that different than your regular experience or a dream? Is there much of a differentiation? If you experience something in a dream, it still impacts your life. If you experience something in a hallucination, or what we would call a hallucination, it still is going to have an impact on you. So on one hand, it doesn't matter. What's the difference? And people are going to believe what they want to believe. Do addictions leave you when you enter the afterlife? Been thinking. Looking down and seeing people eating nice food and having a cigarette will be teasing me. No, your addictions do not follow you into the afterlife. When we shed these physical bodies and when we transcend our meat vehicles, we go to a place where our personality and the experiences and the emotions that were dictating a lot of our lives, they just fade away. We're not connected to that anymore. And addiction is almost entirely caused by trauma. And when we pass out of these bodies and transcend, we're able to look at our life experiences and look at our traumas from a different perspective and say, oh, I see the overeating thing, the drugs thing, the shopping compulsion, the whatever addiction it is. You can trace it all the way back to the source, to the trauma that caused that, and say, oh, like that addiction was a result of something. That addiction wasn't its own thing. That wasn't me. That was a behavior that I was just experiencing and perpetuating because I never healed this trauma, or I never dealt with this unresolved emotional issue. That being said, just because the addiction goes away, if there's an emotional karma or something that keeps you energetically tied to that behavior, it is possible that in your next life you'll be presented with a similar sort of situation or trauma that will cause an addictive sort of situation, where maybe in past lives where you had been addicted, in a future life you may be in the same situation that you can use to overcome the addiction, or to learn how to integrate that part of yourself such that you no longer have to go through the cycle of addiction. So if you're experiencing strong addictions in this life, you probably will in future lives, unless you resolve whatever emotional baggage is tied up with them. Do people enter the quantum world after death? Yes. We are already in a quantum world. We just don't perceive those levels of reality. But when we transcend the body, the quantum reality and things that are associated with that become much more apparent. When we die, can we come back, but to another time or maybe another planet? Yeah, absolutely. The purpose for taking an incarnation is to learn lessons. And if we decide later on that we want to learn a different set of lessons, or we recognize that maybe a different time in history or a different planet, different location is going to be more conducive to us learning the lessons that we need to learn, that we can reincarnate there. No big deal. It happens all the time. We've all had many, many incarnations across many planets and many times.